Hey math kids, today we're going to continue talking about quadratic equations, and we're starting on example 8 in chapter 4D. So this one says solve for x, and we have 3x plus 2 over x equals -7. Okay, so we just need to solve for x in this case. Now whenever we have an x on the bottom of a fraction, we want to get rid of that. So we'll just multiply everything by the denominator. That actually works if you just want to get rid of any type of fraction. So we'll say x times x times x. So we end up with 3x squared. These x's cancel, so we just have a 2. And then this is equal to 7x. Now that's quadratic because we have an x squared, an x, and a constant term. So we need to get everything on the same side to deal with it. So now we have 3x squared plus 7x plus 2 equals 0. And then from here we can use our quadratic methods. So I'm going to use the box method. I'm going to say 3 times 2 is 6. So that's 1 and 6, 2 and 3. I'm trying to add up to 7. So both of those positive, the 1 and the 6. And then I plug that into my box. So we have 3x squared, we have positive 2, and then we split this, so we have 1x and 6x. Okay, now we just factor out, so 3 and 6 has a 3 in common, x squared and x has an x. These have nothing in common, so we just write a 1. These just have x in common, and these have a 2 in common. Since all these were positive, we can feel pretty confident that those will all work. So now the factored form of the pink equation looks like this. And then from the zero product property, we can write each piece as its own equation. And then we just solve those individually. So we subtract 1 from both sides. We're left with 3x equals -1, divide by 3, and so x equals -1/3. This one, we just have to subtract 2, and so we're left with x equals -2. So those are both the answers that make that true. Okay, now we're going to move on to example 9, and that's x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 0. And this one, we could try a box method, or we could try t factoring even, 1 and 1, but that won't add up to 4. So we have to do a different method. You might remember this method from Math 2. It's called completing the square. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the constant onto the other side. X squared plus 4x equals -1. We would divide by the number out in front of x squared if we had one. We don't have that though, so we can move on. Then we do the L step. The L step is we divide by 2, and then we square. So if we divide 4 by 2, we get 2. If we square it, it becomes a 4 again. Now we need to add that to both sides of this equation up here. So we have x squared plus 4x plus 4 came from here. Then we have -1 plus 4 once again right there. So we're going to do a couple things. This is something we call the magic step. And what we do is we write the variable, and then we write this with its sign. So since that's a positive 2, we're going to say plus 2, and our parenthesis, and then square it. That is the same thing as this piece of the equation. So if we were to multiply this out, if we were to do x plus 2 times x plus 2, multiply it out, distribute, and then simplify, we would end back with this. Okay, right here, that becomes a 3. Now from this point on, we can just use regular algebra. So we square root, cancels that. So we're left with x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 3. Remember, when we introduce a square root, we have to do a plus or minus. And then from here, we subtract 2. And so x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 3. And that's it for that one. Now we're moving on to example 10. -3x squared plus 12x plus 5 equals 0. Now this one we could try box method, but if we do that, we would look at -15, 1 and 15, 3 and 5. There's no way to add up to 12 or subtract. Because if we subtract here, we could get 14. If we add here, we get 8, but there's no way to make that 12. So once again, we have to do completing the square like on the last problem. So we subtract 5. Plus 12x equals -5. Now in this one, we have to divide everything by the leading coefficient. So that's the number that's in front of x squared. Okay, so these cancel. We're left with x squared. 12 divided by -3 would be -4x. Negatives will cancel here, but we're still left with a fraction of 5/3. Okay, now we do the L step. Once again, we divide by 2, and so that's going to give us a -2. And then we square, which will give us a +4. -2 times -2 is +4. So we have to add +4 to both sides of this. I'm going to write that up here. So x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 5/3 plus 4. Alright, on just this piece, we use that magic step. So we have squared parentheses. We write the variable, so x in this case, and then we use the elbow of the L step with its sign, so -2. Okay? Now over here, we need common denominators. So if we do 4 times 3, that becomes 12/3. Add those together, we get 17/3. 5 plus 12. Okay, from here we can just do some algebra. So we square root both sides. We get x minus 2 on this side, and then we get plus or minus the square root of 17/3. We add 2 to both sides. And then our final answer, x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 17/3. Okay, we're going to move on to example 11. And I'm going to have to split this into another video. So for now, calculate.